think that, again, it's the intentional, it's going deeper, and I know like a lot of times, kind of like you were saying, Reggie, like in the church, it's presented as, or you see people, it's just like a hurry, like he spotted her and then like he just knew like right then and there that he was going to marry her. And he told her because he had a dream or a vision or someone told him and he did it, and then, 3 months later they're married. And I don't, some people that may work for them. And I think that's why you get to know somebody before you decide to be in something that's very committed and very structured, as a courtship or even seriously dating, I would say.
I agree with that, Amber. I'm glad you said that, because I was going to mention that, because, we see that, to bring this back in, I think what we have to do before we even address like courtship per se, what that is, and the beauty of that, we have to first get out of the way the notion of what Amber just said. So unfortunately, what she just said, that's the framework that a lot of Christians view courtship as. That's the framework. So all the definitions we just gave, we can just throw all those out the window, because in a lot of people's minds, that's not the real definition, even though that's what it really should be. Their definition is, I'm not going to talk to a person of the opposite sex. I'll use a guy, for instance, because I'm a guy. So it's like, for instance, if I'm a guy and I have this viewpoint, it's like, I'm not going to talk to a woman who's not my wife, like at all. So if I'm not going to marry you, I'm not even going to look at you. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm just going to see you and run the other way. And God's just going to just magically come down with a little fairy dust. I'm going to hear harpsichord say, Matthew, that is your wife right there. That's the only female outside your mom you can talk to. Okay. God told me you're my wife. Okay. 3 months later, we're married. That's what a lot of Christians view marriage as. And if you don't believe me, just watch their behavior and how they interact with people of the opposite sex when you're at church. And you see them like, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. And they just scurry off like they didn't get the memo from God, like that's your husband, that's your wife. So like, I can't talk to you. And I can't tell how many times I've heard people say, oh my goodness, particularly women get this, they say, oh, someone tried to pick this, like the Christian pickup line, like, oh, God told me you're my wife. And I just felt, like I was made to feel pressure to marry so-and-so. And I mean, I've heard people tell that to me personally, or I've read books from authors that I don't know personally, but I've read authors' works, and there are ladies saying like, oh yes, like one of the ones I just read was one of the wives on Duck Dynasty. She's like, yep, she was, young, probably just, I think she was 18, and she was told by a guy like, oh, I'm going to marry you. And then she didn't feel comfortable with it, but everyone in the church was like, yeah, that's God because of who he is. So she felt pressure to marry him. She didn't know who he was. She wasn't allowed to really even court him. She was just like, oh, God told us, so I guess I'm stuck. And that whole God told me thing is so like subjective to like, well, did he tell you, or did you want to hear him say that? And so when we get in that mindset of over spiritualizing everything, then we just kind of just the relationships just kind of out the window, because there's no natural process of getting to know somebody. Because I'll tell you, there's sometimes I thought I heard God say that and it wasn't right. Okay. So we have to just, I'm not saying to not allow God into the process, but if we're trying too hard to hear God's voice, we're going to end up missing it. And we're going to end up hearing what we want to hear because we find someone attractive. And it's like, well, I want to marry that person. Also, I'm just going to think that I heard that. And then boom, here we go. And then when we have that culture, and particularly if it's like encouraged, like you just said, like, oh, I married my wife in like 3 months or 2 months, then people are going to think that's the norm, because those are the people those are the stories in Christian circles that sell books and get on stage and, oh man, just look how God moves so quickly. That's not how it always works. So, and I'm not saying that God can't do that, but I'm just saying, if you only know someone 3 months and then you marry them 3 months later, there's a lot you don't know about that person, even though you think you know everything about them. So I think that if that's the recipe that we have, then we're going to miss out on a lot of friendships, and we're going to rush things through. And then we're just going to be courting blindly. And we're just going to be, it's like throwing a dart against the wall and hoping it's a bullseye, blindfold. It's like, oh, yep, and there's nothing. I mean, that's not courting intentionally. That's just courting blindly. Okay. And there's no wisdom in that. You got to know somebody. I'm not saying you have to know them for 18 years. I'm just saying, just don't know them, because I'm seeing people be like, like if they go on a date and then a month later they're talking about marriage. It's like, man, hold on, man. Like, dude, like, there's such a thing as being thirsty, and you need to stop. Okay. Like, this is bad. So that's my take on it. Like, get out of that, like, hyper spiritualness of like, oh, I have to hear, like, in that sense, because when I've been in cultures like that, where that's like the sense, and then like nobody gets it. Like, everyone's like, a month later they're talking about marriage, and they're like 19, and like they don't know what they're doing, and then that's when you can rush it, and then just disaster could follow. So
Yeah, some people are really thirsty out here, looking like SpongeBob SquarePants because they're so thirsty and dried out. But the thought is that, man, I like what you said with that blind courtship. See, some people are in a situation where it's like kind of like the used car scenario, but they're going grocery shopping, and they and all the groceries, they're all covered in black with no labeling, but they just have like one simple word like drink, food, bread, and you don't know what's in the contents. And you're taking that, you're buying it, and you get home, and what you thought was milk was actually orange juice or egg beaters or something that you don't plan to drink. And it's just like, this is not what I wanted at all. That is why we have to evaluate. We have to follow the Russian proverb, trust but verify. So we build a trust with a person, and then we verify, is this person someone that I really trust? Now, I think courtship, as it's described on this call and elsewhere, can be very positive. But me personally, I have to get to the dating stage first. Once I get there, and then also, even beyond that, how would you guys say you could start a courtship? Would you start it as you meet the person, or after you've known the person, just through osmosis? Just oh, you know of this girl at church, this guy at church. How would you get to the courtship stage?
I would say, just from personal experience, like just a friendship with this person. Like if somebody I was really good friends with, we didn't pick each other out and say we had a friendship. We got to know each other. We decided to be in a serious, relationship, and getting to know each other to see if we were compatible. Eventually we decided to part ways, but it was more amicable, because we got to know each other. There were boundaries. We were friends first, and even after that we're still friends. I don't talk to them all the time per se, but like, because we're not like best friends, but there's no sour or hurt feelings, you know and I would say, just that's why I think friendships are so much important, that you have an idea about this person, because you're the friend, you've hung out with them, you spend time, you've seen them in different seasons of their life, you know. And I think in that courtship phase, it just takes it to like another level where it's like, okay, can I have a relationship with you? Is this somebody that I would like to marry one day? Um, you know, can I do this? Are their little quirks going to really get on my nerves? Or do they match me spiritually? Um, what type of habits do they have? Kind of like what we were talking about in the prior video. It's just looking at things like that. But I agree, like, friends first is so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Without without a good foundation, there's no way to build anything.
Right.
I was taught that by Legos.
Because a lot of people, they do, and even in dating, people do this all the time. And I think that's what gets us in a lot of these situationships, or whatever people call it. Situationships, or in these relationships where we get hurt sometimes, is that we don't really know a lot about this person. They just look nice, and um, we kind of ignore a lot of red flags because they're so fun. They're so this. I like the way that they do that, you know. Oh, they're just so handsome, so beautiful. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with finding somebody attractive. You know, you should be with somebody that you find attractive, obviously. But, you know, we get kind of blinded by all this other stuff. And then we realize, oh my goodness, they're kind of a hot mess. And oh my goodness, they're kind of toxic too. And oh my goodness, you know, I don't know what to do. This is really stressful. Then, you know, it comes to a point where we're just at this breaking point where we have to end it, you know, and now it's big sloppy mess because you may have gotten physically intimate with this person, and or you may have, some people do, they live together while they're dating, you know, and that's no shade on anybody, but some people do that, you know, and now we got to split up all of our things, you know, belongings. We got a dog together, who's gonna take the dog, you know? It's becomes a big messy thing, you know. And that's why I think people sometimes have to be careful. If you decide to date somebody, you just want it to be more casual or something, is to be very careful and have boundaries even within that.
And another thing that I was just thinking about, one of my favorite books that I've read is called 10 Stupid Things That Women Do to Ruin Their Lives, by Dr. Laura Schlesinger. I don't know how to pronounce the last part.
Schlesinger,
But
Dr. Laura.
Yeah, Dr. Laura talks about how, you know, sometimes as women, there is this like complacency that we get into in the dating process, where it's kind of like we just wait to be chosen, right? And it's kind of like whoever approaches you, you say yes, and you're like, maybe that's the one, or you know, and you're just waiting for someone to pick you. And so she talks about, like, as someone approaches you, like, men may have the power to approach you, but you as a woman have the power to agree or disagree, you know, like you are supposed to be playing an active role in that evaluation process as well. And so when a man comes to you and is like, yeah, I think you're my wife, you should be assessing, like, is this my husband? You know, you should have your own criteria as well about what works for you. But a lot of times women will just give in and be like, oh yeah, he says I'm a good woman, so sure, I'll just, you know, go along with it. But they don't stop to like really check, like, but if I may be good for him, but is he good for me? You know.
Word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm reminded of an old song, Froggy went a courting. If y'all remember that song when we were kids, Froggy went a courting, he did right. That's an old song, and it basically is talking about this frog who wants to go to town and marry Miss Mouse. And if you look on like Andy Griffith Show, or the Beverly Hillbillies, they have this thing called a courting. And when they go a courting, they always spot one of the women in the show, and a character will come up and say, "Oh, I'm gonna court that there Aunt B, or that there Ellie Mae, or whatever they may call that person." And what's interesting is that in the old sense of courting, the women had almost no say in the matter. A man would see a woman and say, "Oh, I'm going to court her," and that was like everything going to lead in the marriage. And then in TV magic, they would always end up at the altar by the end of the episode, and someone be like, "No, don't get married to this person." And the reason being often was that people would say that person who's courting is crazy, and they know he's crazy, and he's a serial courter that marries women. Basically, he's a bigamist, and that's what we would see, either bigamy or just the woman wouldn't have a choice in the matter. You just have a guy that's constantly trying to marry her, and it wouldn't be an actual bonding of two people. It would be just the guy adding a trophy wife, for example.
Yeah, there's nothing good about that, you know, because again, it's one of those deals where then he's the one that benefits. You don't want only one person benefiting, because here the point about marriage biblically is we both come together and benefit each other, and we're there for each other, and we're two whole people coming together to fulfill a purpose together. It's not he's benefiting more or she's benefiting more. So this whole she's good for you or he's good for you, okay, that's great, but is the feeling is going to be a mutuality to it? Because if I'm only good for her, if she's only good for me, then now one of us is using the other to fulfill our needs or our growth needs or whatever it is, and we're not going together. So then instead of the relationship looking like this, it's looking like this, or it's looking like this. It's just there's nothing even there. So that's why if I'm not, that's why I'm not in favor of that. Well, it's good. She's good for you, or you're good for her. Like, are we good for each other? Is this one of those deals where, we always hear the phrase, it's a match made in heaven. Is it actually a match made in heaven, or is it one of these forced matches made on earth that we want to convince heaven that it's made there? It's like, no, we made it on earth, but heaven, we want you to believe that you made it up there. It's a match made in heaven. Wink, wink. No, it has to be like God bringing two whole people together that actually benefit each other, not us trying to convince, that it's working. I mean, if you have, so anyway, so that's that whole like one-sided thing. I'm not a fan of that at all. Like, it has to benefit both parties.
It sounds like that old caveman analogy.
Yeah, because some people try to make it feel like an arranged marriage, and I mean, some people are okay with that and some are not. So I think it just depends. I think it's one thing to say, hey, I think you would be a good match with this person. I want to introduce you to my friend. I think y'all would be a good match. I think it's one thing to do that. Then I agree with Matt. It's another to be like, they would be good for you. This is it, and it's like, well, it may not be it, they may not be your cup of tea and you may not be their cup of tea. So, and that's okay. It's perfectly fine. But I think that, we have to watch how we do that sometimes, because we can make it feel like it's an arranged thing. And if you say no, like there's something wrong with you or something.
No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Something I noticed about all of this is that when you are intentional, it boils down to this. We were talking about dating, and we're talking about courting, and we've heard commentary that dating is less spiritual, but I say as Christians, everything we do is spiritual. And we say grace before we eat. That makes eating spiritual, but functionally, it's exactly the same thing. We consume food for energy for our bodies. We need sleep at a certain time of night. The sunlight benefits us, unless we get too much of it. We're human beings, and we function as human beings, but we are also influenced by the Holy Spirit, by Jesus. We make our decisions based on that. And I think that dating between two Christians should be intentional and spiritual. It doesn't necessarily mean, for me, my perspective, that it means, oh, we're going to start courting. Because to me, courting is like, oh yeah, we are going for real, full on, let's go. We're going to the playoffs. To me, that's what courting is. And the finals is engagement. Like the NBA finals, which are coming up, that's the engagement. And the championship, that's when you get the ring. That's when you're both married together forever. Just like, NBA champions will be NBA champions going forward. They may lose some games here, but they still got the championship ring. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I see all of this, is that you might call it courting, might call it intentional Christian dating. Maybe courting is an easier word to describe it. But to me personally, when I court, I'm not quitting on it. I mean, I heard about the evaluation and I understand it. That makes sense. But the way I see it is more or less, I'm not just evaluating this. If I'm courting, I am already checking your ring size at a certain point, I'm already thinking about the future and all this, and I don't plan on leaving. If I decide to court somebody, I am
But
not
I
leaving.
think that's where the problem is, Reggie. I think that, listen, I am a believer that it's never the end until it's the end. Like, I'm always reminded of the story of Abraham and how God told him, like, hey, sacrifice your son, right? And he went all the way up to the mountain. He went all the way through the whole process of building the altar and laying his son down, and all the way to the point of raising his arm, ready to strike. And God was like, stop, just kidding. And so, like, I always think about that in terms of, like, you could be at the altar ready to say I do, and you should always be listening for God's voice. Because you never know until you say I do. It's not I do. Okay. And so yes, when you're courting, you are very intentional about each other. And I think that goes along with communicating your feelings. So I'm thinking it's not necessarily like when you're courting, right? And somebody approaches you and says, hey, I'm interested in starting, I'm interested in you and seeing whether, we would be compatible with each other. It's not even like you have those lovey-dovey feelings for each other at that beginning point. Like, that could be something that as you now start dating or going out on dates and spending time with each other and talking with each other, you start to examine, is there chemistry? Do we have this, do we have attraction for each other? Because sometimes you can see someone and, okay, they go to church with you, they're active, they're whatever, you see them from afar, and then once you start, spending time with them, you begin to realize, like, I feel you more like a sister or a brother. It's not really what I thought it was. And so, but with courtship, because there's that intentionality, you're keeping the lines of communication open, and you're communicating like, hey, I feel this way about you. Or if you're not feeling that yet, you may have to be like, check out. Like, you can check out. This is not, to me, courting, it's not like a done deal type of thing. I think it's more about just the intentions of why you are spending time with each other. And the engagement is where I feel, but even then, okay, the engagement is where I feel it's like, you've gone super far. You've said, hey, I believe you are it, and I'm, ready to commit to you. And nothing is going to come in between that unless it's, God's voice is himself, and then, but once again, even at engagement, you are not bound until you say I do, because you can find stuff out, and it's better to break up an engagement than to have to get a divorce. Okay. So yeah.
It's so true. Because, like, engagement, you're getting ready for the marriage. You're going to that premarital counseling. You're really kind of stepping it up and preparing for that, preparing for the end, as you say, the end of your singleness, essentially. So, the engagement
Continuum.
Yeah.
So the beginning of your courtship period may not start off with, like, let me look at rings, but you may be courting for 9-10 months, and by that time you're like, I think this is it, let's talk a little bit more about this, and now you start introducing that.
Mm-hmm. And I do see it, like I've been saying, I do see it as like a period, like it's stages. It's stages. There's friendship, dating, courtship, engagement, marriage. That's how I see it. But here's a fun question. This is kind of like an icebreaker. If the engagement is called off, who gets the refund of the ring?